experienced NASCAR
A fatal crash. They called Dale Earnhardt the Intimidator. He was the meanest, toughest, most famous driver in NASCAR racing. During the last lap of Sunday's Daytona 500, he proved as mortal as the rest of us. His famous black #3 Chevrolet clipped a competitor's car and fishtailed out of control. It was struck by Ken Schrader's Pontiac, then it smashed into a wall. Doctors say the force of the impact snapped his head forward, smashing the base of his skull and brain. Though rescuers raced to free him, there was nothing that could be done to save him. At the hospital, 49-year-old Dale Earnhardt was pronounced dead.
And standing by in Detroit is Dr. John Melvin. He is adjunct professor of biomedical engineering at Wayne State University. For the last 30 years, he's been studying what happens to the human body in auto crashes. And for the last 10, he's been working to make racing cars safer. Hello, Dr. Melvin.
Hello, Jane.
Dr. Melvin, you just have to look at the videotape and think, you know, there are far more spectacular crashes on the racetrack. That one didn't look particularly dramatic. So what happened?
Well, that actually is exactly the problem. In the spectacular crashes, the car really stops over a long distance by bouncing and hitting things, but not very severely in any one impact. So the energy of the driver who's strapped in the car is dissipated over a long distance and over a long time. When the car stops very abruptly, as it did when it hit the wall, the violence is very great, but it's hard to capture on video because it's over between two pictures of video. It's so quick that you really can't appreciate how violent that stop was. And that's the problem. It just doesn't look like much on TV, but in the real physics of it, it was a very abrupt stop.
Help me understand those physics. What was taking place?
Well, as the car is coming down the track, as you saw, it veered and went up towards the wall. Now, it was still moving along the track at about the same speed as it had before, but part of that speed was into the wall, and the rest of it was along the wall. Now, it's the speed into the wall that is the important speed, because that has to go to zero because the wall doesn't give. But you note that the car slides along the wall, and in fact, all the other cars, which are running at the same speed, stayed with the crashed car as they went on down the track. So the real crash speed in that situation is just that speed into the wall, which was probably 30 to 40 miles per hour. That doesn't sound like much, but because of the stiff chassis of the race car, that results in a very, very quick stop and a very high G level for a very brief period of time.
So what do you know about what happens inside the car at that point? What happened to Dale Earnhardt?
Well, from our testing, we know very much what happens with a restrained driver who's wearing a multi-point system like the double shoulder belts and lap belt crotch strap arrangement that's used in those cars. The driver, his entire body moves forward towards the point of contact due to the deceleration, and the belts then pull tight and stop his body. The problem is there's nothing to stop the head except the neck. So the neck is now acting as the restraint for the head, which weighs, typical person's head is 10 pounds, and a helmet is another 2 pounds. So there's a 12-pound mass being stopped by the neck. Now the problem with that is when the head whips, the acceleration level can be as high as 100 Gs on the head. So that means 1,000 to 1,200 pounds of load is created instantaneously in trying to keep the head moving on an arc. And it's that force that breaks the base of the skull or breaks the neck, one of the two.
So what can you do to protect the head and the neck?
Well, you need to somehow either keep the head from rotating by providing some sort of a surface to catch the head, which is what we do in the Indy cars on the side and the rear, which you can't obviously do in forward. And the device that has been found by our research, as well as Mercedes-Benz research, is the head and neck support, a Hans device, which is designed to keep the head moving with the chest and stopping with the chest and eliminating this load in the neck because it doesn't let the head whip.
Now, Dale Earnhardt wasn't wearing that kind of restraint.
That's right. There were a few drivers in the race that we're wearing them, but it has not achieved universal use yet in racing in any form.
I know we're playing hindsight here, but had he been wearing the Hans system, would it have been sufficient to allow him to live through that impact?
There is a possibility, but I don't know enough about the details of the impact to truly say that it would have made all the difference. The Hans works very well under certain conditions, and we're working to add certain things to the race car, the stock cars, to make sure that it works in other conditions, and that remains to be seen whether or not it could have done the job by itself.
What else are you working on?
We're working on a combination of 4 things. Obviously, the Hans and how it interacts in oblique crashes with the seatbelt system. We know that we can improve the seatbelts in these cars by using an arrangement that's more like the IndyCar seatbelt system. Stronger sides on the seat to help contain the lateral motion of the driver, and then finally nets to contain the motion of the head sideways to basically to redirect the head into a more forward motion where the Hans really is effective.
If you can design systems to save the drivers at Daytona, what can you do using the same technology for drivers on our highways?
Well, this is really the end goal of our research, is to understand enough about how to do this so that we can apply it to the passenger car. The problem is that race car drivers are willing to sit in really confined spaces, and that's part of this protection. In the passenger car, you have to have a lot of room to sell a car, and we need to fill that up. We do it with airbags right now. We have to understand exactly what's happening to the human body in those severe race car crashes completely before we can start changing passenger cars.
Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome.
That was Dr. John Melvin. He's an expert on auto crash safety and an adjunct